Hello and welcome back. We are continuing our MySQL, mostly SQL, but MySQL MariaDB focused tutorial series, and we are continuing looking at stored procedures today. Now, last time we went through and we did back on day 11, we created our nice little tutorial get address where we could send a parameter in and pull a record back. Also did a very simple one where we showed some tables. We did some things where we did some selects. Now we're going to get into something a little different. We're going to talk about variables. Now I'll go flip over here and I'm going to go ahead and dive into this one. So I do my normal delimiter. Let's blow this up a little more just because. So I do my delimiter. And I'm going to go ahead and create a replace procedure. I'm going to call this one count rows. And in this one, I'm going to declare num rows is an integer. And you see this much like you would most of the declarations in the database. So here I'm giving it a name, which is num rows. I'm getting it a type, which is int. And then a default value, which is 0. And then end. So if I do this, it's not going to actually do anything terribly useful. So if I do call get rows, we're going to see basically nothing. Whoops. I'm sorry, not get rows, count rows. And I should probably change my delimiter back. Okay, so nothing happens. Because it wasn't doing anything interesting. All it was doing was declaring a variable. Now what I can do here, same thing, is I'm going to declare it, and now I'm going to do select num rows. Let's go ahead and give it a default value of like 5. And now, actually let's do this, just so we can keep track of these guys. That way you've got some good examples. Okay, so now we're going to create a replace. This time we're going to set our value to 5 and we're going to do a select num rows. Oops, we're going to do that just to be clean. So I don't think it likes it otherwise. And now if we come in and we do our count rows, wherever that went. Is that right? Count rows. Now we see num rows is 5. So we're getting a value back. That means that we can come in with our variables and we can do some interesting stuff. Like, let's say num rows is 4, but instead, and we're going to still return num rows, but instead, we're going to come in here and we're going to do select count star from, let's say, address. Oh, and we're going to do select into num rows count star from address. I'm sorry, wait, it's count star into. I always forget the order of that. So now let's see what that does. There we go. So now where to go? Call count rows. Now it's 3, and if you look at select star from address, you see 3 rows. So now we're actually able to do something here. Now let's do this. Let's do show tables. And let's do, well, I just got to copy all of those. So here's what we're going to do is, now we're going to get a little more interesting. Let's do this. So we're going to take a few tables. Let's see. We're going to call it, we'll keep it the same name. But now we're going to do address. Let's do app user, lookup type, and all dates. And now we're going to change this up a little bit. So in each of these, we're selecting a count. Now here, we can do num rows, but we're going to do, now we're going to do a multiple. So we're going to do A1, A2, A3, and A4 for our 4 counts. So we can declare multiple variables. And we're still declaring the same type and the same default value for each of these. So now, instead of num rows, I do A1, A2, A3, oh, A3, when I get there, and A4. So now we've got all these. So instead of select num rows, what we want to do is now we want num rows equals A1 plus A2 plus A3 plus A4. And with this, we do a set. That's just how they do it. So you can't do a straight up num rows equals. You do a set. And now we're going to select num rows. And let's see how this works out. I have no idea how many rows it's going to be, but it's probably like a double-digit number. So now when we call, count rows, we get 13. So we're getting each of those. Now we could come in and we could do select A1. We could select as we go, so we can actually get all of these as we go and see how it's going. 3 and A4. So let's do this with sort of a debug. And then we're just going to do, what was that, count rows. It's probably faster to do it that way. At least if I do it like this. And so now we can see that our A1 came through. We got 3 for that, 4 for A2, 3 for A3, and 3 for A4, which is 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 3 is 10, plus 3 is 13, and boom, we have our total number of rows. So we've been able to declare variables and do something with them, which you could normally do. You can do some of this. We haven't gotten into it, but you can do it with your normal script type of information. We're just doing this now within a sort procedure. So we can actually we can actually hold some records and do something with them. We can actually do some manipulation now within it. So we could do things like, let's see, what would be something interesting? I have no idea of something interesting to do. So we're going to skip that part about the interesting part. But okay, sorry, back to this. So we're able to, when we do a select without an into, as we see here in the A1, A2, A3, A4, and then the final one, we can see that we're going to see this. We see this output. This stuff is actually sent out as part of the result. It's not how it occurs in all databases. This is what I'm saying is sort of important, is that some, you can have multiple result sets come back. Some will only allow one. So you're going to have to look at your specific database if you're getting away from these two. But if I get rid of my selects, and let me go back to that, then all of this other stuff, if I get rid of the selects that aren't an into, then I don't see the declare, don't see that one. I don't see any of these selects. I don't see setting the num rows. I don't see it until I do select num rows. Now I could do num rows, comma, A1, comma, A2, comma, A3, comma, A4. So I can do that and give myself a little something different for my result set. And now we see num rows, plus I see each of the variables. So you can see where I specifically set them. Otherwise, and this becomes important when you get into the development side of it, because this is a single result set. The time we did it before, what we did before was multiple result sets. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 result sets. So you're going to have to, depending on what your your connection is and how it handles multiple result sets, you're going to have to address those differently than you would this one, where this is simply row 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5. There's different ways that you're going to address such a thing. Now, you can do, let's do select star from address just to see what that looks like again. So let's do city state. Yeah, let's do city state. Now we can do, let's jump down here. We're just going to call it CS test. And in this case, we don't need to declare, well, we will declare this. But now, we're just going to make these varchar 50s. I can't remember how big our city was. But we can do city and state. And now we can select city, state, into C, S from address. And let's see what this looks like when we get done and we do select CS. Let's default those. Can't default it to that. Let's default it to undefined. And let's see what it does for us. Oh, darn it. I want to get that. And okay, now it looks good. So now let's see what happens when I do CS tests. Whoop. Result consists of more than one row. Now this is where I'm getting multiple because I just did this into that from address. Well, since it's into C and S from address, C is a single string, S is a single string, but address is going to select, if I actually do select city state from address, remember we're going to get multiple records back. So I have to do something to, in this case, if I want just one of those, then it would be something like, let's see, what was the address? It's T1 ID. Then I could come back and I can do int ID where, what did I call that? T1 ID equals ID. And now I'm going to have to give it what did I do? Create a place that. Let's see. So int ID. Let's look at that again. Let's make sure I've got this. And did I miss anything weird, did I? Oh, I'm sorry, it's the opposite direction. I forgot. It is, I do that wrong half the time. It's not, it's name and then type. Okay, so now if I do call, what is that, CS test, and I give it a value that's valid for one of those three IDs, I'm going to get a record. If I give it one that's not, then I'm going to get nulls back. Because that now I see that default value come in. It did not get a record back for this. So it didn't assign those in. And so instead it just went with their default values. So we can play around with this quite a bit and are going to continue to do so. We'll look at some things like actually building with our result sets and some things like that. So we're going to get a little more complicated, but I wanted to get into just some basics this time around of declaring variables and assigning things to them. You can either do a select into, select some value into our variable, or we can do a set. We can set our value equal to another variable or a value, like a number, because we could always do set num rows equals 15. We can do the same thing there. We just did it as a mathematical expression before. So we've got a couple different ways to play around with this already. You should start seeing some of the power of a stored procedure, particularly if you're having to do some complex calculations and things like that, where you may want to like hold a max or some calculation or sum from one table and then utilize that into another. And like I said, we're going to continue looking at that. But for now, I figure it's a good start into our introduction to variables in SQL. That being said, we'll wrap this one up. So go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time.